Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Jams and Tea podcast, where we review new records. And today we're going to talk about two of them. Today we are going to be talking about the latest album from Hemlocke Springs, the debut album, as a matter of fact, The Apple Tree Under the Sea. And we are also going to be talking about an album from one of my favorite people in the country music scene, Miss Emily Scott Robinson. We're going to be talking about her album, Appalachia. Jen, you were the one who enthusiastically put forward this Hemlock Springs debut album. And as someone who had no clue about Miss Springs and what her deal was, and so this colorful, explosive album was a big surprise to me. So tell me, why'd you put this in front of us? And tell me a little bit about Miss Hemlock Springs, because boy howdy, have I been interested to learn, because this is a very special record.
I discovered Hemlock Springs when a track off of her EP Going, Going, Gone called Girlfriend started really blowing up on TikTok in the early 2020s. She just has this very unique presentation of indie synth pop, dance pop, and similar to Chappell Roan, who she just did an interview with. She was using social media, short form video, things like that to promote her music. She's released all of her stuff independently so far, including this album, even though it has some big name producers behind it. And so I've been following Hemlock Springs for a couple of years, and I've been excited for what this debut album would look like because I loved Going, Going, Gone. And what we get on the Apple Tree Under the Sea is a very ambitious debut concept dance pop record about Hemlock Springs as an aspiring voice of the next generation of pop. Much of the metaphorical writing that's going on in this album, I'm seeing it and I'm trying to wrap it around in my head in terms of how much of this is speaking to Hemlock Springs's own drive to succeed in this music thing and continue to be independent and continue to be this kind of singular voice. And so much of this album is exploring the idea of feeling like you don't belong in the space that you want to contribute to. The titular apple tree, and she alludes to the red apple multiple times in a couple different contexts, one of which I think being the Garden of Eden and the other being Snow White. And Hemlock rejects the idea that she is either of the characters associated with either of these apples in either scenario. She is not Snow White. She is not being chosen to do anything or suffer any kind of grand fate, but she's also not, committing any kind of original sin. She's just kind of arrived in this state of the pop landscape being in a little bit of flux and uses this record to explore the challenges that she's kind of had to overcome to figure out who she's going to be, what she wants to contribute to the genre space, what she wants to bring to the table, and what Hemlock Springs as a character ultimately represents for the artist behind it, which I think is a really, really great concept for a debut pop album, especially from a performer whose performance style is so vibrant and so energetic. Hemlock Springs has major theater kid energy, and I love it. And so much of this record is about exploring that kind of eager theater kid persona being jaded by the new reality of the real world in the music industry, but also the natural opposition that a young black woman is going to face in a white man's music industry. So for you, you're going into this with not much experience with Hemlock Springs' music. As somebody who's just coming into this for the first time blind, what are you getting out of this?
Well, to be short, an incredibly fascinating bedroom new romantic style dance pop album with a vocal presence that is so dexterous and bubbly and strange. I was in no way prepared for the explosion of color that this album ended up being, but I got on board super quickly. I think that this is such a fascinating album from almost all angles, like from a songwriting conceit level. You take a look at some of these songs, and what they are about in the finer details is just so fascinating. You have a lot of examinations of relationships and like again feeling like you don't belong or do belong in a specific space or area, and as well as a relationship with God that is not too dissimilar from something like the Rosalia album that we got last year, where there is kind of a allure of the divine in a romantic context where that is kind of flipped on its head, and it's also in more of a like religious piety way, and then it kind of flips itself again with the like Moses, for example, is this song which I mean glorious song, probably my favorite song on the entire album, just this absolute barn burner of an explosive pop cut, but it is filled with these biblical allusions to Hemlock like being this sort of vassal for performing miracles and biblical acts and miraculous acts as a sort of way to prove and assert her own dominance within the specific field or within the specific relationship. But within the writing, they kind of come to the conclusion that these miracles they're performing are an act of power, but they are also a simultaneous act of subservience that they're not totally on board with. And that kind of weird examination is on here in so many different ways. Like another sort of song, I think it's Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Ankles, where the premise is sort of examining another relationship and sort of just like showing her what she values, I guess, by rejecting this relationship that she sees of this person who is like older and like has children with this person who like clearly settled for this man who's like I think she mentions being like in his 70s in the part of the song, like in the second half of the song, and like this person who has just like no actual agency and is like shackled with things like children, and like somebody who's basically given up their entire life for this person who they are now subservient to. They are now basically performing and like just sort of holding this person up in a way that they never anticipated or signed on for. And that is something that she handily rejects. She clearly on this album wants agency. She wants to be able to hold her own power. But there's continually things that keep undermining this power, be it God, be it somebody who is, again, romantically interested, be it a specific space that you do not feel welcome inside. And man, all of this is being done underneath these crazy fucking dance grooves. I mean, like, this album made me think of shit like Madonna multiple times, like Sever the Blight. Like, oh my God, this is so 80s dance pop. This would be like, put this
Yeah,
right
I
on the
wrote
self-titled.
down I wrote down like this is Flashdance,
It's
which like,
awesome. It's so fucking sick. And like again, the sort of explosive beginning of The Red Apple, which is just this sort of very linearly structured song, but is kind of this immediate just send you into the stratosphere like whoa moment. And then like beginning of the end, head, shoulders, knees and toe, knees and ankles rather, head, shoulders, knees and toes.
head,
Thanks.
shoulders, knees,
That
and toes.
she did that intentionally, god damn it. Or www or woo 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 woo. I have no fucking. I'm not even gonna begin. Like the sense of humor here and the kind of playfulness of the delivery style is also a really big, really alluring thing about this because on a song like again the first couple of songs in particular, there's kind of a and I don't want to say this in a way that's off-putting, but like there's slightly annoying affectation that she kind of leans into that becomes like bizarrely sort of God, I'm not sure what the real word is, but like it's so blanketly obnoxious that it becomes catchy by sheer force of will on something like Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Ankles, where it kind of sounds like, and forgive me because I love all of the songs on here. I think this is a great record. But the sound here is like, oh, this is like if Tones and I wasn't unbearable. I get it. This is what they're aiming
The
for.
use, yeah, the use of like a chipper very childish, very what's the word I'm looking for? Like high-pitched intonation allows this kind of narrative storytelling where this is a character who sees the world extremely plainly because
Hmm.
they're not jaded by the work that it takes you to do in your brain to conform to what
Yep.
life has decided your station is. Like, no, I still have potential. I can still do better than this. I can do better than this person. Here's all the ways that they have failed themselves that I'm going to try to avoid.
And like there's just so many great moments of groove on this album. It has swing to it that you just wouldn't anticipate. I mean, like there are things like Nile Rodgers guitars on here that are again accentuating that kind of 80s disco vibe, but there are also these really blown out, crispy, saturated instrumentals that are just so bright and so much fun. I've not really heard an album that leans into this specific flavor of pop in, I mean, a good long while, if I'm being honest. Like, there is nothing out there right now that wholly sounds like everything that is being combined and synthesized on here, which again, like, I'd like to say that, after 6 years of doing this and keeping up with new modern music, I'd like to say that that's worthy of some celebration because again, this may be a 33-minute long album, which is, again, a really enticing thing when everything is as just immediate and colorful. This is it's a debut that is designed to just drive by and just like you will never forget some of the moments on this album because they are so big and grandiose. There is a theatrical theater kid bombast on here that is so much fun, and she leans into like different, again, vocal affectations and dynamics that I just think are really, really out there and really, really interesting. Like there is a sense on here of like I thought about performers like Ween and Tom Waits when it came to her delivery style and her lyricism and how kind of off kilter and occasionally sort of provocative it can feel. But I mean, like again, I love Ween and I love Tom Waits, so there's no bad words being exchanged here for what's going on the apple tree under the sea. But this is just such a strong debut project that I was immediately like, every time I finished this, I was kind of like, oh man, I really wish that this was, entailed an entire discography of music like this that I got to latch onto. So in a, roundabout way, now I'm just excited to see where she goes from here because you can take this sound anywhere. You can do so much with a lot of the writing and concepts on here. This is a declarative moment for this artist, but it also just feels like something that has boundless limitations. Like you can go absolutely anywhere. And I feel like she can meld her incredibly eccentric style with this sort of 80s dance pop thing. Again, New Romantics is a kind of style of pop album that usually requires an ungodly amount of polish to accomplish well. And this kind of bedroom synthesis that she has on here is such a unique little combo. It makes me wonder why it's like this is the only thing like this that I feel like I've heard recently.
The certainty by which Hemlock Springs directs this kind of concept is just so fun to watch a debut artist do. And she has such a like flowery pen mixed
Oh
in with
yeah.
all these perfect pop star moments of doing the simplest but exact right thing at the exact right time to really make a line stick. Like I loved this part on, where is it? I wrote it down. It's this part on Moses. Words spoken from an uncouth, be wary, alert of falsities and half truths. I spurned that shit because I wanted to. And the change in her tone between those two lines is sublime. And it's got these Lennox synths underneath it, and she's got these
Yeah.
George Michael vocal inflections going on when she's leaning more into her funk and soul influences. And I love it. I love those influences coming back, and the pop that was inspired by disco and funk, but wasn't entirely in that direction. Like George Michael, Annie Lennox, things like that, being a point of inspiration for Hemlock Springs is so interesting because
Oh
you
yeah.
already have this kind of compromised feels like the wrong word, but like a hybridization of these two very unique musical styles that are kind of like a squares and rectangles dichotomy. But she's taking that liminal space in between them and expanding on that by bringing a conceptual framework to it, by attributing different artists that brought different things to the table in those regards, ultimately by centering herself metatextually as somebody who is a product of that. Like the ending track, Be the Girl, is,
Mhm.
I think, an affirmation of her influences being worth chasing. And
Yeah.
that's where the rejecting the image of being Snow White comes from, where like it is a little bit weird and a little bit crass and a little bit more out there than the, Disney princess movie soundtrack pop girl expectations. But ultimately Be the Girl is about embracing that you're not who you used to think you had to be successful or to be creatively, artistically, financially fulfilled. And I love her dedication to that. And I love that as a kind of coda for the album's concepts.
I really couldn't agree more. This is just such a thoughtful album, and it feels like it's the kind of debut you can really tell someone designed from the ground up to be as explosive as possible. Like, this is an unignorable album to me. Like, you may not get along with every specific thing she's doing, but that's what makes an artist like Hemlock Springs exciting, is that I genuinely have no clue where this project could be taken in a phase two. Like, I want to see what this next chapter is because there is so much possible. There is like, this is a 30-minute long condensed display of talent and versatility and color. And I'm just really excited to be able to be along for the ride, just because this is clearly something that is evident that there is a conceptual angle here. There is a unique sonic angle. This just checks every box of something that is like, when something is designed to grab your attention, it can go one of two ways. You can do something that's big and loud and just sort of, it's a bit of a flash in the pan, and it's like the noise that you make during your debut can just kind of be drummed up to theatrics. Or you can sleekly design everything to just have as much impact as possible so that really it's about being unforgettable rather than unignorable. But the crazy thing about Hemlock Springs is that she's both very, very clearly. And give me more weird bedroom disco. I don't know why this isn't a bigger thing, but now that I've heard it, I want more of it.
This is absolutely innovative stuff that we're getting here for this time period, for this stage of bedroom pop that we're in, where it seemed like we've had some bedroom pop people get really big and kind of abandon that aesthetic once they get a bigger
Hmm.
budget behind them. I'm not saying that Hemlock Springs has to stay making music like this forever, but I missed hearing stuff like this that really had that bedroom feel to it. It wasn't just the latest big step forward from somebody who got their start making bedroom pop. You know what I mean? I
No,
miss
yeah.
actually listening to bedroom pop.
No, I completely agree. It feels like we live in an era where this has the potential to be like a bona fide movement just because of the way that the industry is moving and shaking right now. It's a good way to get yourself known without necessarily being the biggest artist out there. And it can, like, the limitations of bedroom pop can also just further let you kind of hone your aesthetic. I feel like that this is not something we're necessarily seeing in a vacuum. This is still something that on a bigger, grander scale, like, I could see somebody like Hemlock Springs collaborating with somebody like Dijon, for example. And that, like, that collaboration just in my head seems like fireworks. So I want to see what happens when you combine this alchemy with potentially other people, because that I think could be really, really special. But even if she doesn't, if it's just her, she's clearly versatile enough to be able to command her own presence. Like, she could pull off a platinum no features if she gets to go far enough.
Well, yeah, the versatility is a big appeal of this record for me because there's, like I said, the disco influences, the flash dance stuff, the R&B influences on this are great. And she seems like a person who has a kind of wide variety of influences and things that she wants to try to do and unite them underneath this kind of singular vision where the concept of the album comes in. And I'm excited to see, and that Rosalia comp is great. I'm excited to see what she continues to do if she's going to keep making albums like this that take that bevy of influences and tries to, anchor them to some kind of central idea like this album does.
So for me, thumbs enthusiastically up.
Yes, please check this out. Go support Hemlock Springs.
It's a half hour. Even if you don't like it, you gotta hear something like this. This is too unique to ignore.
Yeah.
Had to have my caffeine delivered. So now we are going to move to talking about the latest release from one Miss Emily Scott Robinson. And if you ask me, who are the most underrated modern country artists? I will breathlessly tell you the answer is Rustin Kelly and Emily Scott Robinson. And I first became aware of her because of her 2019 album Traveling Mercies, which is this wonderful little album that was this very troubadour-centric country, Americana sort of folk, just sort of like it's one of those albums that's kind of difficult to talk about because it is an album that is purely constructed out of amazing fundamentals. There's nothing really that you can say about a lot of Emily's music that is gonna get all of the kids excited. There's not a lot of like innovative cutting edge production. There's not a lot of buzzwords you can use to allure people in the same way you might with other people or other records in modern music. And it's because Emily Scott Robinson very much plays it close to the chest when it comes to her sound, when it comes to her influences. But she makes up for that by making utterly fucking incredible songs. Her palette may not be the widest in the world, but someone sticking this closely to the country music, folk music, and bluegrass music essentials, I kind of think that it's important we have a couple people like Emily Scott Robinson to sort of keep the torch alive just because this is not exactly the biggest and widest and most successful area of modern music, so to speak. So I missed her album after Traveling Mercy's American Siren, which I have been assured is also fantastic and I need to revisit. So when I saw that she was releasing a new album this year, I really wanted to give it a shot. And so I started listening to this record, and I can pretty much say a lot of what I could for Traveling Mercies with Appalachia here, in that there's not a really easy way that I can sell this to people or to, hook them or present them with something that maybe they're not entirely expecting when they hear a modern country, folk, Americana, Appalachian folk music kind of thing. And that does lean into the Appalachian folk music aspect because both Emily is from Appalachia and this is very much using a kind of bluegrassy sound palette. And I'm kind of cushioning the blow here because I need to tell you all that you need to fucking listen to this album right now. Because Emily is a talent who has gone under the radar for a little too long, if you ask me. And listening to Appalachia, there's no other way to put it. This album reached inside my soul this week. This album is special. I felt moved by this album multiple times. The sound palette here may not be anything innovative, but the gentle, almost Aaron Dessner-esque layering and production techniques that are on this record are remarkable. This is an elite production work that sounds warm and crisp, but light and atmospheric and gorgeous. And Emily's singing voice has never been better. Oh my God. The songwriting and vocal performances on here, they are worth your time alone. And then when you combine the two, you get a combination that I found utterly enrapturing. And Yeah, you may say that I have a bit of a target painted on my back for something like this, considering this is an album that, I mean, to put it bluntly, this is about places like where Jen and I grew up. This is something that's gonna hit me very close to home. But it's not just because of its proximity, it's because of the fact that the songwriting here is genuinely so excellent. I have several songs on here that I think are as good as anything that the modern country greats have written in the last 5 years. I think that songs like Sea of Ghosts, the opener, Hymn for the Unholy, or The Time for Flowers, Bless It All. These are songs that I would put on the same level as Jason Isbell, as Sturgill Simpson, as anybody who is doing their best work right now. But the way I want to open with this is talking about the best song on here. And oh man, this is going to be fun to talk about. The song Time Traveler. This is a sledgehammer of a song. I I really wasn't prepared for
Oh,
this at all,
yeah.
like even remotely. As somebody who I really just kind of threw this in front of you, just being like, I don't want to forget about this, and I just kind of threw this at you and was like, hey, we got to listen to this. How did you feel in regards to this album and specifically this song? Just because I feel like this is such a if you listen to this album, you're gonna have a reaction to what this song does to you.
Time Traveler is an absolutely gorgeous song. And all of Emily Robinson's writing across all of this album is what ended up really drawing me in, which is not to leave out any other compliments for her vocal performances, especially the direction and the mixing of vocal harmonies. There are
Mm,
several amazing duets on this album or moments where Emily is layering her voice over itself in these wonderful arrangements. This is sublimely produced minimalism, where
hmm
the energy of the performers and the synergy of the performers comes first, and the instrumentation, well done as it may be, is so traditional and so rootsy and so fundamental that for me, I immediately gravitate more towards song structure, towards the lyricism, and towards like what the general tone of the instrumentation does for those song conceits. But Time Traveler is really the moment where I became, well, really, Sea of Ghosts was the moment where I became a full believer in what this album was
Ditto.
doing. But Time Traveler surpasses even that because it goes beyond just being a reinterpretation of someone in mental decline because the song is ultimately about seeing somebody experiencing dementia and experiencing flashbacks and clearly like engaging in dialogue with people in their personal life as if it's in the past. And the narrator who's observing this person, not just describing them as experiencing a form of time travel, but ultimately being extremely sympathetic and even envious of this perspective because the narrator takes time to reminisce on this person's life before this really started happening to them. They describe this person hearing voices that weren't there for the first time as a new mother with a baby in her lap at 23 years old. But then it just comes down to seeing the torture that this person went through, both with the condition that they were in and what the medical establishment at the time attempted to do to treat her, with
Electroshock
pills that
therapy.
made her not eat pretty much for years and
Hmm
kept her emotions at bay and made her less of a person than she was before. And seeing that as a cruelty to the spirit that this person initially was. And I just loved this little couplet. There's darkness in our DNA, some fraying strand. So if you want to fly away sometimes, I understand. And ultimately, coming down to this person's experience as an escape from what their condition does to isolate them from the world around them. I just thought it was such an interesting take on this sort of thing because there are lots of great country songs about like seeing someone that you love in decline, whether or seeing yourself in decline. But rarely does it take such a distance in epistemology, but portray that with such optimism and love and care, because it's clear that the narrator can't fully understand what this experience is like, which is what calls for thinking of it as this kind of larger than life speculative fiction. But all of that ultimately leads to a conclusion that like their life is better for being able to see it that way. Because if all you're left with is the quiet suppression that this kind of treatment of mental illness turns a person's life into, that is more tragic than embracing the optimism in the symptoms and ultimately in what is still delusion. It's such a particular story with such, I mean, unique themes in its songwriting. And I was just completely blown away by it.
A lot of what this album is about is kind of accepting the place that you are in within the greater cycle of nature or life. It's like that's what a lot of like Appalachian life and tradition is about. It's about the preservation of a specific kind of way of living, but not in the way that it's like, like I'm not talking about sort of like conservatism. I'm talking about tradition. I'm just talking about the way in which ideas and stories are passed down to people. And Emily clearly understands that. And Time Traveler is a way of rationalizing yourself into that cycle and trying to become more at peace with it. And it's like her rationalization of who it seems to be her grandmother in the story of the song as being this time traveler who's able to relive kind of a highlight reel of her own life is both a method of coping for the songwriter, but also there is genuine beauty to be found within the kind of thorniness of this particular subject. And I mean, and just on the face of it too, it's just such a thoughtfully written song. Like, I mean, by the end of it, when she has the couplet of "You held me on the day I came into this world, now I hold your hand like you're the little girl," and I'm fucking ripped apart. Like it's I can barely even repeat that without getting choked up. But like, I mean, because this album really does play it close to the chest, there's just I can't ignore how much of this album just sort of sounds like parts of memories that I have. It's insane. Like listening to songs like Hymn for the Unholy and like I'm like some of Emily's really sort of more impressive vocal runs on songs like this, which are still kind of subtly employed, they make me think of, I mean, when I used to hear my grandmother sing John Denver songs, is what a lot of the performances on here sound like. And it calls to mind images of places like Kentucky, places like West Virginia, places like Tennessee. And like the way that nature is described here as this kind of, again, this cyclical thing that you participate in, that where the idea of ancient songs is brought up on this album multiple times, and just the idea of like inheriting some sort of ancient mantle that's been passed down to you. And it makes Appalachia seem so much more inherently mystical. It seems like, there's all like there is a sort of very thin but very evident kind of Southern Gothic influence on this album, specifically on songs like Sea of Ghosts, which is literally about being so involved with nature and the greater world around you that you become kind of acquiesce to the idea of death as a part of that cycle. But once it actually hits you, and once you try to connect with those who have passed, and you feel a kind of dissonance in your brain because you're like, I'm connected to all these people and I am within this cycle just as they are. But the inevitable distance between the two of you and the fact that you can't communicate with these dead spirits, these the sea of ghosts, it means that you still feel disaffected from it, even though you're connected to it. And that kind of contradictory way that she rationalizes her relationship with the people who came before her, and kind of talking about the way that people will be after her. And she talks about wearing a red dress so that, the ghost will be able to identify her specifically, is this way that she's trying to participate in the greater cycle. It is trying to be a part of everything while still accepting that everything is transient, everything is liminal. It will eventually end, it will eventually fade, and trying to be at peace with that is most of this album. And there are still moments where it gets a little bit more rootsy and it's a little bit less ephemeral, like on things like the duet Cast Iron Heart, which is again, this is one of the second great country song released this decade where it's using a cast iron skillet as a focal point for its central metaphor, alongside Jason Isbell, naturally. But this is more about, like, that song was about tradition in its own way and how it kind of breeds toxicity. And this is kind of an inverse of that. This is how tradition breeds a kind of depth and understanding where you come to know someone in a really, really intimate way. And there are a little bit more, there are less immediately heavy songs on here, like the slightly cheeky Dirtbag Saloon, which is also a song that is about gentrification, that is about how all of these places that are important to people are being taken over and subsumed by corporations and money men and all of this kind of stuff. But it's not focusing on that. It's focusing on the in the moment warmth and memories that you can find with the people around you in
Yeah,
places
it's
like this.
it's the last call at the bar before the money men come in, and it ultimately becomes a song about finding as much joy as possible in that last moment.
Yeah, and there is a lot of, like, we're describing a lot of like thorny and kind of difficult subject matter, but the overriding kind of term I would use to describe this album is just comforting. There are songs on here like The Time for Flowers where it's like you very rarely hear with it kind of engaged in this way, just because when country music tends to veer towards the more political sentiments, it tends to be very blunt about it, which I mean, I very much respect when that is actually achieved because it means that people aren't afraid to say what they think. But on songs like The Time for Flowers, it is incorporated in a way that feels part of the greater portraiture of the album. It doesn't stand out necessarily. And The Time for Flowers is just this, talking about the fact that nature persists beyond us, the things that, like, everything in this world is going to outlive us. So all of these things and all of these times that we are living in, they do eventually, the pendulum swings back. The cycle will begin anew. You will have to suffer, but there is something on the horizon because bad times simply do not last forever, because in the past they haven't lasted forever before, they're not going to last forever in the future. And these aren't hollow sentiments. These are things that are detailed. They are interesting. They are full of depth, but they also let you know that, I mean, like, I don't hear a lot of music that is speaking to the experience of Southerners in the way that I do with this album, of people who just need the excess to end, who need the crowding of modernity to just be shoved aside because it's too much. It's too overwhelming. And this album is about kind of finding clarity in your surroundings. And I really, really value that. Like, there's not a song on here that does not contribute meaningfully to the greater painting that Emily is painting on here. It's thoughtfully written. It's gorgeously performed. Like, I can't stress enough. Emily Scott Robinson is one of the greatest voices in modern country music. She is superb at singing, at blending her voice with harmonies. It's incredible. Like, Hymn for the Unholy sets such a great tenor for how much of a, like, commanding performer she is, but it's never something that feels like she is, you know, vocalizing for the sake of it. She's never doing anything without very specific intention. You mentioned how this is very kind of thoughtful minimalism, and I can't agree more. This is an album that makes maximal use of minimal parts, and honestly, I love it more every time I listen to it. Like, this captivated me in a way that, like, Emily's music has gotten me in the past. This got its hooks in me deep. I think this is an incredible record. Like, this is the first thing that I would want to reach through my webcam and grab whoever is listening to this and be like, if you are not interested in this, you need to be. Find a way to be interested in it because you have to hear it. The fact that Emily is as small of an artist as she is after having this career that she's had, oh God, please, we got to give her more momentum. We got to do something for this lady, because if she's making music this good, fuck, man, it's so good. It's so good. I can only say so much with flowery and academic language. This shit just, as somebody who does not always feel as though experiences like mine or Jen's or people who live in much worse places than we do right now is not always spoken for and is not always spoken for elegantly. It's so fucking refreshing to hear someone actually do that and do it as well as I've heard anyone do anything. This is album of the year material, and I mean it.
It's been a big year for me in terms of wanting to get more of a grand view of my place in the world in a philosophical, spiritual sense. And a song like Water is Wide, which is another moment that emphasizes that you're a small part of a greater whole that will always kind of extend beyond before and after, and then will be there for you when it is your time. That really resonated with me because it takes everything about the time for flowers and then adapts it into something that the speakers on The Water is Wide can use to better each other's lives. And a duet is very hard to do.
Hmm.
It's very hard to do convincingly, and it's very hard to do in a way that justifies its own concept. Every duet on this album, every guest appearance is perfectly suited for the kind of song that it is. The
Hmm.
Water is Wide, no exception. Hearing Emily be in dialogue with the voice of this other singer, Duncan Wickle, as they come to this realization, makes the point that this song is trying to make so much more impactful. And you get moments like that when you've really refined your presence as a songwriter, and when you've really been able to work on your craft and put something together that is maybe is a little bit different from what you usually do. But like, I love the emphasis on dialogue that this album has, even on the songs that aren't duets. So many of these moments come from Emily describing herself having a conversation with somebody or voicing herself being in dialogue with somebody else, like on Hymn for the Unholy, where there's a lot of second person pronoun usage
Hmm.
to make this point about how they're trying to tell someone that, you're not a failure. Your time has not run out. Just because there's a lot of like, Happy New Year, I want to kill myself anxiety on Him for the Unholy.
Hmm.
Uh, that, it's
Definitely.
February. I didn't have zero of those moments
Hmm.
this past winter.
Exactly.
So I felt this nice kind of salve as I've gotten to really sit with this album and listen to it, where that theme on that song especially really resonated with me. And that whole recurring theme on this album of being content in your understanding of your microscopic place in the grand scheme of the world is so refreshing for country music. And it does this while still, in many, many ways, emphasizing engagement with the world, emphasizing putting in effort to be engaged with the world, to
Beautiful way of putting it.
make change for yourself, to understand other people, to make connection. It's a very realist album in terms of the most basic human psychological needs to recognize our place in the world, how to maintain that place in the world in healthy ways. And even though it goes in a lot of dark places and exploring those concepts, it ultimately, by the end, by the fairest view, comes out in a very optimistic place. And I just had so much joy. Even as so many of these songs, like I'm like you, I had a lot of emotional moments listening to this record,
Hmm.
but I ultimately came out of it feeling very rejuvenated, and I'm very grateful for that in a way that goes just beyond like, oh yeah, this is a good album. Like I needed this.
Hmm. I I couldn't agree more. I driving around a rural area listening to this has been like a very quiet comfort of mine these last week and a half that I've been listening to this. And I plan on listening to it a lot more. At the very least, you owe it to yourself to listen to a song like Sea of Ghosts or Time Traveler because those are standout songwriting moments of the year that for sure that will not be the last time I talk about either of those. I felt spoken to by this album in ways that very few albums have legitimately done that. So I want to compliment it on that. Even then, I do not have a very particularly large family up here. It's really I can count my immediate family members on two hands, really. So anything that makes me think about my childhood back when I was a little bit more connected to certain family members before certain family members had passed away and before certain family members of mine, I had similar experience to the song Time Traveler with them, and I felt a little part of me felt kind of healed after hearing this, just because that was something that it's painful to watch a loved one go that way, and it's not an experience that is easily mended. Like, you hear people talk about that, or you hear people sing about it in the song, and you might not even necessarily feel like, just because it's such a personal thing that you may not even feel directly connected to what that is. But like, this song had a similar effect on me that the song Brothers did from the album Angel in Real Time by Gang of Youths, which is one of this channel's favorite albums of this decade so far, where it kind of delves into the complex, thorny relationship that someone has with their family and the people that came before them. And it's very difficult to write about that stuff honestly, and it's even more difficult to write about that stuff in a way that rings as even moderately authentic. But I really think that a lot of people will get a lot out of this album because it manages to feel robust and soothing. And I don't say that about a lot of music. Like, a lot of music can bring you comfort, but like, this is something that I feel like in 10 years I will still want to listen to albums like Appalachia, because it makes me feel more at home with the home that I already know. And there's like maybe three things theoretically I could think of that are probably more valuable than that music can do. And don't ask me to think of them right now because I can't. So, this is a very special record, and I enthusiastically co-sign checking it out because Emily has outdone herself here. I will be partaking in every moment in her discography I have not already experienced because of this.
Absolutely agree. Wonderful, wonderful record. Please go check it out.
That is going to be it for our new reviews of this week, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to us. And as always, rock over London, rock on Chicago. We try harder. Avis. I don't know what Avis is. Don't ask me what that is right now, because I don't fucking know.